I I'm coming to realize that I need a lot of time to myself and a lot of time to recharge. And of course, part of that is my disability, having cerebral palsy, ADHD, anxiety, depression. All of these conditions, comorbid conditions, are extremely draining for anyone. Let's talk a little bit about masking and burnout. Um, I mentioned in a previous video that last year in September, um, while I was still at the University of Redlands working on my undergraduate degree, I started working part time as a reading specialist. Basically, the company sends me to different students' homes or different locations like the library, wherever the student can meet me. And I teach literacy. I teach reading and writing to students who have problems with, who may be behind in reading for whatever reason. You know, maybe they have ADHD, maybe they have dyslexia, um, speech and language issues. So I love, I absolutely love the company that I'm working for. They're so accommodating. When I mentioned to them that I was having trouble getting to one of my students' homes because I rely a lot on public transportation because I don't drive, so I rely on either public transportation or I get rides or Uber, right, to my sessions. They instantly gave me a $5 an hour raise to try and help kind of compensate for some of those like Uber costs and all of that. And I really feel like I'm blessed and lucky to have this job because I got hired on um, when I was a junior in college. And so I didn't have a bachelor's degree at this point. I had an associate's degree and I had some like 2 years of previous tutoring experience because I volunteer as a tutor for another a nonprofit organization known as on Wheels here in Southern California. So with that, with those 2 years of previous tutoring experience, that basically met their requirement. And then in the job posting, it does say associate's degree preferred but not required. But the requirement is either 2 years of teaching or 2 years of tutoring, which luckily I did have. Um, but I consider myself lucky because the pay is 30 an hour. They started me off at $30 an hour. And then when I mentioned the the whole transportation issue to them, they raised that to 35. And I think 35 an hour is like what they cap out at for reading specialists. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the highest they go. But again, I do live in Southern California, and we have an extremely high cost of living here, uh, which I'm sure most of you already know. But it's still a decent hourly rate range for somebody who doesn't have a bachelor's degree and is still or was at the time an undergraduate college student, right? Because speech pathologist, which is what I'm going to school for, once I finish my master's degree and all that, speech pathologists, like their hourly range here in California, it varies really depending on the setting where you work. In the schools is the lowest pay rate, surprising no one, right? But I think it's like somewhere between 50 and like $70 an hour. So like I said, it's a decent hourly wage. The company has been very accommodating, very flexible. It is part time, and I've been able to, for the most part, choose like my hours, and they send me a list of students, and they ask me if I can take on a new student. And they tell me these are the hours and the days that they're available to work. And so I can pretty much move my schedule around to fit my needs. If I'm going to school at the time, which I will be starting again in August, For my master's degree, I'll be able to kind of shift my schedule around and work with students that work with my schedule. So I consider myself very blessed and very lucky to have this decent part-time job. And I love what I do. I love seeing students improvement over time and being able to read and all of this, right? But uh, up until yesterday, I was only working with two students. And since I am taking the summer off from school, uh, my supervisor emailed me and asked if I could take more students on my caseload because there's basically a wait list of students in my area waiting for reading specialists. So I said yes, and I took on three additional students. Well, because like I said, I'm taking the summer off, and plus I need the money because even though my grad school is still pretty much going to be paid for, there are still extra expenses that I have to account for, and I have bills to pay and a kid to feed. So um, I could always use more money in my pocket, right? So I said yes, and I told her I could take on, because she sent me a list of students, and I said I chose three, which I thought would work well with my current schedule and that I could take on. And so I started working with three additional students yesterday. Two of them are twins, and they're in the same household, and so I work with them at their house from 10 to 12:30. So the first twin, I work with her from 10 to 11:15, and then from 11:15 to 12:30, I work with the second twin. And then I have a break from 12:30 till around 3:50, 3:45, 3:50, because that's when I have to get going to my next tutoring session, which is takes place in a public library nearby. So I did that, and then from 4 to 5 I have that session, and then I basically don't have time to come home or have another break because I have another session at 5:30 with a student who's a little bit further away from 5:30 to 7. So basically I did about 5 hours of tutoring yesterday, right? Most of the sessions were back to back with the exception of that like 3 hour gap in between the morning session and the afternoon session. But I was so freaking exhausted by the time my last session came around. I just wanted to pass out. I wanted to sleep. Felt overwhelmed. I felt like I just couldn't think, like my brain just had enough. And I feel like, yes, I'm very much, I suffer from generalized anxiety, and a big part of that is social anxiety. I've always been very socially anxious. So I think that the fact that I have to commute to random people's houses and go in and introduce myself and put on like this confident demeanor, because I'm supposed to be the expert, so they're looking to me to provide reading intervention for their kids. And I've always had issues with self-esteem, so I think this whole idea of having to go to a random person's house for 1 to 3 hours at a time, depending on how many kids I'm working with and how long the session is. I feel like I'm masking, right? Because us people with ADHD, we do kind of have to mask to appear somewhat normal, I guess, unfortunately. And I feel like I've been masking my entire life. And the social anxiety definitely doesn't help. And the fact that I'm very much introverted. So being around people all day long drains me, even though this is what I want to do. I want to work with kids. I want to help them. I want to make a difference. I recognize and I realize that being around people all day long is very draining for me. So I think that's definitely part of it. I recharge by being alone. I have to have time to lay on my bed in my room and watch my superhero shows or watch, Bridgerton or Grey's Anatomy, whatever show I'm watching at the time. I have to have that time to literally lay there and do nothing for at least an hour or two out of the day, because that's how I recharge. That's how I unwind, and that's my downtime. And I felt like yesterday, with all these sessions back to back, and by the time I got home, it was nearly 7:30, and I had to come home and feed my son and help him with his homework. And I guess I really felt like I had no downtime. And then, that coupled with the fact that people with ADHD do tend to get overstimulated. And that's one of the things. We're overstimulated often by, too much noise or too much going on around us. And I am definitely one of those people. So I don't know. I guess it's all these factors combined: the being introverted, having to mask, having to appear or try to appear confident when I know I'm really not, the lack of downtime. But when I think about it, it was really only 5 hours of tutoring, and I had a 3 hour break in between. So I guess I'm just kind of upset that it affected me so much and that I'm so exhausted, because when I add up all the hours that I'm working in one week, right now it really only adds up to like 15 hours a week. So if I could barely handle 15 hours a week, I don't know how I'm going to be able to handle a full-time caseload in the future when I do become a speech and language pathologist. So I'm either going to have to work part-time on a contract basis and pick my own hours, or maybe, I don't know, start my own practice, my own clinic. That way I can choose how many hours and how many days out of the week I want to work, which I guess would be ideal, but then the issue would be like medical benefits and all of that, I guess. I I'm coming to realize that I need a lot of time to myself and a lot of time to recharge. And of course, part of that is my disability, having cerebral palsy, ADHD, anxiety, depression. All of these conditions, comorbid conditions, are extremely draining for anyone. So, yeah, I guess we'll see what happens.